Mark Rogers TV back with you talking SEC Media Days on a Wednesday when the old ball coach hit the podium, Steve Spurrier and Bret Bielema as well. We bring in William Gunter of FoxSports Radio there in Greenville and Columbia, South Carolina. And let's talk about the old ball coach. William, thanks so much for joining us. Doing cartwheels there in Knoxville and Fayetteville, according to Spurrier. But, of course, 7-6 at Downer there in Columbia, so it's kind of funny to hear that comment and then the reaction from Jones and Bielema.
Yeah, it was obviously not the year that they anticipated. It's funny, tonight on the SEC Network, they've actually were replaying the South Carolina-Kentucky game, and a lot of people are talking about that. That was a disaster. But going back to what you said, South Carolina itself obviously was picked to win for just the second time in their history in the SEC, picked to win the East, and it didn't happen. And the way things came completely unglued defensively, it was one of the worst defenses South Carolina's ever put on the football field historically. And, to go 7-6, certainly they weren't happy. And then I'll be honest with you, Mark, I didn't think Spurrier would have much of any flair at SEC Media Day to make any comments whatsoever about any other programs was kind of unique. I thought he'd go in very humble, have a nice slice of humble pie, sit there quietly, take his questions about retirement, maybe the Confederate flag, and get the heck out of there, hit his Arby's visit and get the heck out of there. But apparently feeling the need to get a little frisky with Tennessee and Arkansas.
Yeah, so the 6 losses didn't hurt the flair for the old ball coach. That's good to see. He kept mentioning getting back to the level that they established for the 3 consecutive years, finishing in the top 10 and getting back to the top 10. He kept throwing out that phrase of getting back to the top 10. And you mentioned the defensive collapse last year. It started on opening night and really carried through the entire season. And despite as bad as the defense was, 3 times with a 2-touchdown lead in the final 5 or 6 minutes, so it could have been much better for them. Balance that out with a few wins that they squeaked out as well. So your thoughts about the defense, and is dreaming of finishing in the top 10 a little bit too much for this program?
No, it's not. Let's start with that part first, and because it leads into the defense. But it's not. With that being said, everybody wants to know what's your prediction. What could South Carolina do this year? There's 3 games that they should win. We're going to try to get that in there. 3 that they should win. You got Vanderbilt, who's back to being Vanderbilt of the 90s. They're better. They should beat Central Florida at home. They should win that game, and they should beat Citadel. Mark, about after that, they're all toss-up games. They're really – they're not necessarily better than anybody, and nobody I look at is necessarily better than them. So, it is realistic. Can you get the ball to bounce your way? Now, it starts, as you mentioned, defensively. Number one, everybody wants to talk about how South Carolina couldn't get to the quarterback last year, and that was definitely a major issue. They were playing third-string linebackers at defensive end, and maybe we should have seen that coming. Maybe we should not have got as caught up in the hype as we did. But the defensive ends were very bad. But you know what? Safety play was atrocious. They were awful at the safeties, and they've addressed both of those needs. Now, how good are those guys? Marquavius Lewis, Dante Sawyer, Shameik Blackshear, Taylor Stallworth is a redshirt freshman on the defensive line. Can they come in and make an impact? Yes, they can. And at the safety, they get Kansas transfer Isaiah Johnson, a junior college player, Torrey Boyd. John Hoke has obviously been brought in. It's realistic. The talent is there. I think people get too caught up in what happened last year. I think people get too caught up in bad recruiting right now. South Carolina's recruited well for the last 4 or 5 years, and the players are in place to win 9 or 10 games. That doesn't mean they'll do it, but the players are there. The schedule, to me, in my opinion, sets up to win 9 or 10 games. So it is realistic. Would you ask me to bet on it? No, I don't. I've got them going about 8-4 right now.
Yeah, the schedule's not brutal by SEC standards. It's still very competitive, because I always look to see, when I look at an SEC schedule in particular, who do you play on the other side? So, of course, they play Texas A&M as they typically do. That's the cross-division rivalry of sorts that they've set up, and they also have a date with LSU. So that's pretty difficult right there if you look at that. I'm impressed with, and I give much credit to South Carolina for scheduling difficult outside of conference, because you could say, hey, we got to face Clemson every year. We're going to call it a day and schedule 3 cream puffs, as is done elsewhere in the conference. But it's been Central Florida quite a few times the last few years. It's been dates with North Carolina as well. So they beef up the out-of-conference schedule, still programs that they should beat, but they're not give-me. So I credit them there.
Listen, I'm excited. We love the North Carolina series. Now, one thing that's interesting, South Carolina has not jumped in the foray of everybody else who's scheduling these marquee games after 2016. I actually, on our website, the Reynolds and Gunter website, Fox Sports 1400, the Reynolds and Gunter page, I have a blog up. It's about a week and a half old. There's not a lot of options out there for them to start scheduling marquee opponents after 2016. I think it's Penn State and Rutgers. Nebraska, West Virginia is about your best options going. They've not been afraid to schedule. Steve Spurrier's opinion, kind of like what you said, hey, look, we're going to play Clemson. Let's play one other marquee opponent. Let's play a non-Power 5 team, and let's play an in-state FCS team. So that's generally how they do it. Obviously, they've played NC State, North Carolina State. This will be the third game against North Carolina. They've had several games against East Carolina. They're willing to do that. I'm kind of interested to see how they schedule past this coming year.
I love that Penn State series. I didn't
I would love to see
that got signed.
Right.
Anytime you can schedule a heavyweight Big Ten SEC matchup in the regular season, I look forward to that. That's interesting.
Well, they don't have
a home deal.
They don't know. They don't have it. I'm just offering teams that are there to schedule because don't get because see, everybody here wants to play Virginia Tech. Everybody says, well, let's go play Virginia Tech. They're right down the road. We can play them in Charlotte. But Virginia Tech's booked up to like 2022. I mean, Virginia Tech's got all these non-conference games. So what I did is I went through and found teams that South Carolina could realistically play because I'm like you, hey, we want to see a few more marquee games. Penn State's one. Penn State does not have many games on the docket. Rutgers is another one. West Virginia, Nebraska. Because, again, we're interested. Clemson up the road. Clemson's got Auburn and Texas A&M in the next 4 years. We know Michigan and Florida are going to hook up, Alabama and Florida State, Alabama and Southern Cal. You got a lot of North Carolina and Georgia are going to play in 2016. You have a lot of these great non-conference marquee games. South Carolina doesn't have any past this year. They do a good job of scheduling, but I'm interested to see how it plays out starting next year.
Yeah, doing some homework there, looking up to see who's got some holes in the upcoming slates there. You got me excited on Penn State, though. But, there's some teams out there that they can play. And, again, I credit them for not just saying Clemson and we'll call it a day, but Central Florida, North Carolina in recent years. Let's get back to Spurrier because I don't know if this hurts him on the recruiting trail. You mentioned that you've liked the recruiting classes, but I think we've got to put that in comparison to their competition because the recruiting classes are generally, and correct me if I'm wrong, in that 15 to 20 range nationally. But then you mark that up against a Florida and especially Georgia in recent years, and it kind of pales in comparison. Even Spurrier's made the comments and taken a few shots at Saban saying he should win all the games because he's got the number one recruiting class, and we recruit well, and we still have the 9th or 10th rated class in the SEC. So he's 70. It's only a matter of time at some point. So do you think that hurts him on the recruiting trail?
Well, it hurts him because of what he said last December. Steve Spurrier is an off-the-cuff guy. He says what's on his mind. That's the fun thing about covering him. He'll come over after practice some days, and he'll just start giving opinions on whatever topic he feels is necessary. And if you've ever watched an interview with him, he may take your question and he may start down one path, but he takes a right turn and goes to what he wants to talk about. And so with the way Steve Spurrier answers questions, he got asked by the state newspaper's Josh Kendall in December about his future plans, and he said, well, probably 2 to 3 more years. Well, that goes out. That's in print. That's very easy for opposing coaches. If Steve Spurrier had not said that and given opposition to opposing coaches, I don't think they'd have a problem. I mean, one bad season doesn't hurt them. Now, you're right. You're exactly right. A lot of their classes are between 15 or 20. In years past, they've had great coaches. Look at the coaches that were on their staff, Brad Long and Jay Graham, both at Florida State now. The strength and conditioning coach, who I thought was phenomenal, the best in the country, Craig Fitzgerald, who went to Penn State and is now with the Houston Texans. Shane Beamer is at Virginia Tech. They've had really, really good assistant coaches. Ellis Johnson, another one that's back out on the market right now. You could take those classes. You could take those underrated guys, the Devin Taylors who went drafted, the Melvin Ingrams, and you could make a really good football team, make 11 wins. That, to me, is the question mark. Because South Carolina recruits fine. The difference in the SEC, you know this, is not the recruiting classes. It's the coaches on campus that develop those guys when they get there. Georgia's a perfect example. Georgia has a top 5 class every year, but Georgia may be the most overrated, or they may be the most underachieving team since 1980. No national championships. You go back to last year. How did they lose to South Carolina last year? How did they lose to Florida, of all teams, last year? They go and beat Missouri 34-0 and still can't win the division. So to me, it's about the coaches you have on campus, not about the recruiting classes. And I will say again, I love the coaches down there. I think the world of those guys. When you cover them, you get close to them. You don't want to see anybody lose their job. But they're not as good a coaching staff as they were when they were building the program with Steven Garcia and Marcus Lattimore and those guys, and taking the DJ Swearingers, the Devin Taylors, and those guys, and turning them from 3-star recruits into NFL draft picks.
Yeah, we get hung up on 4 and 5 stars, but if you really look at even some of the really stout programs across the country, especially if you're not talking Alabama, if you look at the other programs that are really good, they build much of that roster on 3 stars, and there are plenty of impact players in the NFL that were 3 stars as recruits out of high school. Before we let you go, I think this is going to be a better discussion maybe if we can catch you mid-August, but what are your early odds on the quarterback situation?
It's Connor Mitch. Steve Spurrier is playing a weird game that he better get out of. I'm going to tell you that right now. And I think there's some local media-driven effort to make a walk on the starting quarterback. But at the end of the day, listen, Connor Mitch was a highly recruited player. I mean, I think people forget he chose South Carolina over LSU. It's a shame. It's a shame, and this is a mistake they made last year. They should have given him more opportunities. They never had. I don't know if people realize this. South Carolina last year never had anything more than a 2-touchdown lead all season long. And so they can never really get Connor Mitch an opportunity, but you still should have given him more opportunities. The guy broke all kinds of state records in the state of North Carolina in high school. He's a quality quarterback, and I've told people the offensive line is actually going to be better when you start to break it down. They have very good running backs in Brandon Wilds and David Williams. They need somebody to step up. It's probably going to be a young man, Debo Samuel, but they need somebody to step up to take the pressure off Pharoh Cooper. And Jarrell Adams, the tight end, it looks like $1 million. The play looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane. He's got to have a big senior season, but Connor Mitch is not the question. The question, again, for this team will be getting to the quarterback and will be safety play. If they do that, I'm willing to bet. I've got an article coming out sometime in the next week or two. They'll win. They'll play 13 games, and they'll win 9 of them.
Okay, 9-4 South Carolina. You mentioned Jarrell Adams. Everyone looked at me. We had a forum, and I named him as my 5th-rated SEC tight end, and I got all sorts of arrows thrown at me. So that's all right.
Never
like you say, he's got the potential.
I mean, I've watched him. He's from down the road, and I've watched him grow up and come to South Carolina. I really thought. I'll say this: I thought when he came to South Carolina, he should have been a defensive end, and I think that probably is more so now when you look back at last year and the fact that South Carolina again was playing linebackers at defensive. They didn't have. You talk about a total disaster last year, but I thought he should have been playing defensive end. I remember talking to John Schumann when I was doing recruiting. John Schumann, the coach up at Hargrave, and he said he should be playing defensive end, not tight end. He could make several more plays as a defensive end and tight end. I had one NFL scout about 3 years ago, Jadeveon Clowney's junior year, who came out and said the second best looking prospect at South Carolina was Jarrell Adams, just best looking with out there standing on the practice field, looking like an NFL athlete. Now you got to play like an NFL prospect. We'll see if he can do that this year.
So we got William Gunter on the line from Fox Sports Radio out of Columbia, South Carolina. and at Greenville as well. You mentioned a couple articles you have out. Where can we catch those?
A couple different places, to be honest with you, Mark. The fun job of a media journalist, right, for spursandfeathers.com, a lot of that associated, obviously, with South Carolina. I do a lot of freelancing on my own for our particular website, which is you go to FoxSports1400.com. You click on the lineup tab and click on Reynolds and Gunter, and then I have my own particular section called Gunter Spot. Put out today an article talking about schedules. Schedules are so important. I think people get lost on schedules when you start making predictions for 2015 and looking at the toughest back-to-back games for each SEC team, because you mentioned the Western Division, no cupcakes in that team. So back-to-back road games, put that out today. I've got predictions coming out. Predictions. I think I'm going to shock people with my SEC West prediction. It's not going to be Alabama. It's not going to be Auburn. It's a team with a returning quarterback. They play 3 true road games, and they don't actually go on the road until October 24th. So that's kind of easy to figure out. But I'm going to have that out later this week, and then also write for thebigspur.com, do some basketball, football recruiting.
All right, we're not going to try to cut through the suspense, but I'm guessing that it's also a team that I consider to have the second best total roster in the SEC, that has a great running back, great wide receiver, and a stout defense and a big question mark at quarterback, although it is a returning quarterback.
Oh, we'll throw it out there. It's Texas A&M. I'm going Texas A&M. Is that who you're going back?
No, it's not, because I did say the other day on the radio that the two most intriguing teams to me in the SEC are LSU and Texas A&M. And if there's a dark horse for me, if you can call them a dark horse, it's LSU, because of outside the quarterback position. I think they're loaded. A&M intrigues me because they can sling it all over the field. I think they've got the best wide receiver core in the country, if you're talking 4 and 5 deep. Plus the defense was, although it was awful last year, Myles Garrett obviously a stud, and they've recruited studs on defense. Let's see if they play like studs. And, of course, they got the new D coordinator.
John Chavis comes in, and again, that schedule, Alabama and Auburn come to College Station. I think they had a trip to Mississippi, I believe, is the first true road game, October 24th, and they close out the season at Vanderbilt and at LSU. So 3 true road games this year for Texas A&M. I love Kyle Allen, 6'3", 200 pounds, should have started last year. I was a witness. Kenny Hill was a Heisman candidate on Thursday night against South Carolina, but I love Kyle Allen. I'm with you on the wide receivers. John Chavis is great, and the way they've recruited, the talent is there. I'll say this, LSU, not sold on them. No depth on the offensive line. You can't go through the SEC lacking depth on the offensive line. Brandon Harris, I think, is a question mark, and that's at best. Love Leonard Fournette. The defense is great, but I have lasting images of Kevin Steele the last time he ran a defense. I think West Virginia is still scoring down there in Miami. That's terrifying for me. I got LSU taking a tumble this year. I think 5th, 6th at best. Les Miles is going to have to eat some grass and pull a rabbit out of the hat, I think, to get that program. The depth scares me. They've lost a ton of people, Mark, over the last few years early to the NFL. They do have talent. There's no question about that with the way they recruit, but they're lacking in the depth department.
Okay. Interesting. A&M.
Going A&M.
We'll see if all those top 5 to 10 recruiting classes come to fruition this season for Kevin Sumlin. All right, William. Appreciate the insight into all this. Good stuff.
Hey, anytime. Glad to do it. Glad I can figure out the Google Hangouts thing. Pretty cool little setup here. Glad to join you whenever is possible and talk a little college football. We certainly South Carolina or Clemson, we love talking those here. But anytime you want to discuss any type of college football, I'm always available.
Definitely. We'll track you back down.
Take care, man. Thank you so much.